Thanks everyone for joining us. And I'm just gonna give you a brief overview of what we'll go over today. So the objectives of this webinar are to discuss how we can create a culture of compliance through continuous training, and the importance of going beyond the checkbox approach for compliance training, as well as highlighting the importance, the challenges, and the best practices of effective compliance training. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Pam Ramsbott.
Hi, everyone. So nice to be here with you all. Can you hear me okay and see me okay? Guessing it's a yes. I'm coming to you live from Denver, Colorado. So I'm happy to be here with you all today. My name is Pam Ramsbott. I'm the Director of Global Talent Management for Litmos. And I've spent many years in the talent and learning and development space with the focus on helping our employees grow and develop. And compliance training is often a really large part of that work, and also an important part of a learning and development strategy. So I'm excited to be here with you today and talk a bit about some challenges that we face with developing these types of programs, and then hopefully provide some tips to help you make compliance training more effective for your workforce. I'm also really thrilled to be sharing this time today with Emilee Johnson. She joins us from Celigo. She's the VP of Corporate Enablement and Global Sales Transformation, and she'll be joining us a bit later to talk about her compliance implementation and the programs that she's developed for Celigo. And not to steal any thunder, but I think one of the most exciting things about this is Emilee did this with a really small team, and many of us face challenges of resources and having folks to implement programs. So she's going to tell us how she's done it with a pretty small team. So looking forward to chatting with Emilee shortly. Before we move to that portion, I do want to talk a bit about this concept of like moving past check the box. So I know I'm talking to a lot of learning and development and talent professionals out there who have had the experience of creating and administering a compliance training program. And I don't know about you, but I've often felt like, wow, it can be a little disheartening when our workforce feels like this is just something they have to do and check the box. But today I want to talk through some ways to think about compliance as really an organizational differentiator, and how it can contribute to building a more ethical corporate culture. Some ways I think about that is both with this enhanced reputation internally and externally. So internally, compliance training can build trust with our employees. And what I mean by that is this consistency. We do compliance training pretty consistent with our organization, and employees can really expect it. It's coming, it's something that they know that happens. And that consistency really can build trust within your workforce. Another way we think about that is also within the content that we provide. The content itself can build trust when we promote safety and security in the workplace. We also think about that externally. So organizations with high quality compliance training may be seen as more trustworthy. People want to work with and buy from organizations that have a strong reputation for ethical practices. Maybe you heard this from friends or colleagues recently over Thanksgiving, but I've often heard people say, oh, I won't buy from that company, or I won't do business with this company because they really just don't believe in the ethical practices of the company. And so what compliance training can really do is help employees within that organization and really promote a more positive perception externally. I also want to spend a little bit of time with the concept of improved efficiency. So here, highlighting the standardization of compliance programs that can improve the administrative strain for your organization. And we think about efficiencies gained by implementing and tracking, updating compliance training that's in one centralized solution, such as an LMS. So LMS solutions that offer that robust reporting capability, as well as a library of regularly updated and off-the-shelf compliance training, can really just help you gain efficiencies within your programs. You can also think about this as a way to integrate compliance into other training programs that you already have going on, rather than offering something unique and separate. And lastly, compliance training can build better decision-making within your organization. So ethical companies can use compliance training data to think about insights on the culture and think about how to make organizational decisions that can positively impact the workforce. So a little engagement here. We have a little poll for you. So what is your organization's top challenge for compliance training? Goals that don't reflect organizational values, insufficient or static reporting, lack of employee or management engagement, lack of implementation resources, lack of training consistency, or if it's something else altogether, please add it to the chat so we can have your voice heard here. And Liz, how's it looking on the chat response?
Not seeing much yet from the chat. I'd be very curious to hear if folks have something in the other category.
How we do on our poll?
Let's see here.
For some results.
Get back to the polls. I can maximize that here.
All right.
Oh, lack of employee management engagement is looking like a big one.
Winning the show. I see it. All right. Some reporting. All right. Resources. So really across the spectrum here, we all have challenges. Organizations vary. Leadership within organizations vary. Priorities vary. So it is really very common to see all of the challenges represented within your organizations. And hopefully we'll touch on a few ways you might mitigate some of these challenges in the next few slides. Right, and if anything comes up on the chat, just let us know, Liz. Thank you.
Will do.
All right, super. So thanks for sharing those. Obviously, you're not alone in challenges. But in this next section, I want to talk about some challenges we hear often and then some mitigation strategies. This particular challenge I refer to as completion-only goals. And when an organization only has one measure of success for compliance, it really does reinforce that notion that it's a check-the-box activity. You do the training, you meet the goal, you complete it. And what I want to encourage us all to think about is transitioning away from that just one metric, which is a very important metric, but it's not the only metric. And when we think about other metrics that we can use to measure the greater impact of compliance training on the organization and really moving towards, again, that ethical company. If you're already doing this, amazing. I'd love to know more about what type of goals you have in place and how you're getting sponsorship for those goals. So if you're doing this already, please put it in the chat and share with your colleagues here what's working for you all in this space. I think it's a great way to really change the conversation around completion only. So would love to have some more conversation there. So really rethinking your goals. What type of measures could be helpful from an organizational standpoint to not just track compliance completion, but compliance impact? Maybe it's something aligned with your culture or aligned with your values, or maybe it's something aligned with a risk mitigation strategy you have in place. How can you tie your compliance training to your organizational goals? Another thing to think about, which I love this one, is milestone metrics. So if we work in an organization that really values compliance and we know that it's an important factor for the organizational culture, in theory, we would take our compliance training because we know it's important to our managers, we know it's important to our culture and our organization. So one way we can look at that is to see how seriously the training is being taken by looking at completions on a shortened time frame. So if you look at how many folks within your organization prioritize the completion of their training and measure, say, 10 days, how many folks do the training after 10 days versus the 90-day goal? And you can kind of get a sense of, do you have a body of employees that are really waiting till that last minute, or do you have folks that are prioritizing this as value add and doing it quickly so that they can really promote and advocate for doing this important work? And lastly, competition can be a great motivator. So building leaderboards and manager level reporting can help managers actively reinforce the importance of compliance training with their teams and really moving it beyond check the box, but discussing the value and the importance. The next challenge I want to talk about is insufficient reporting. And here are a few ways to mitigate those challenges. So again, this is kind of moving past that once a year. So if we monitor the progress beyond that one status report, it can really bring compliance to the forefront. We know that report once a year, the annual compliance is important to our stakeholders, but it's important to think about assessing dynamic data regularly, and it can improve completion rates, and it can also provide you with regular data that you need potentially for regulatory bodies at that point of time. It also allows you to have sort of a deeper level conversation and sends a deeper message to your workforce. If you're moving beyond that check-in and you're examining broader organizational behavior using that data, and you're looking at it across the organization regularly to demonstrate how your company is living its compliance values. Well, this was the big one, so we'll spend a little time here. Lack of employee engagement and with compliance training for both managers and employees. And if y'all are doing some great things, please, I encourage you to share it with each other in the chat. I'm going to just talk about a few areas that might be helpful. One thing in particular that we talked about is really about setting clear goals. So if we've got organizational goals and we've got learning goals and objectives, it's helpful for the learner both to understand what's in it for them, why are they doing it, what are they going to gain, and it's also really important when they know it's important to the organization and it's part of something they do collectively as a company. So really focusing on those goals can build engagement. It's also important to make the training materials accessible. And accessibility means a whole host of things, as we know. But in this case, I'm thinking about just true access. So is it online? Is it offline? Is it on my desktop? Can I get it on my phone? Really thinking through the strategy of meeting the learners where they are and getting them access to what they need in a place that's meaningful to them. I also think about relevancy. So making training relevant to real life examples and case studies that resonate and feel like they're connected to job functions. And then lastly, which we hear about quite often in the world of social, learning needs to be bite-sized and gamified. So I looked up this stat. TikTok recommends videos be between 21 and 34 seconds, if that gives you any idea of what we mean by bite-sized. So really catching people's attention fast, trying to build some concept awareness, and then adding on to that can help with the engagement and compliance. Next, I'll talk a little bit about this challenge of limited implementation resources. And this one really hits home for me because creating and maintaining accurate, up-to-date training specifically for compliance can be time-consuming and challenging, and especially difficult if organizations don't have all of the knowledge they need around what regulatory requirements they have, or maybe they don't have a legal resources to help build training. So to solve for this challenge, think about using online training platforms that offer pre-built compliance courses, things like automatic features for assignments, and making sure that training is being consistently repeated and completions are available. And then also administrative support to reduce the burden on your internal team can be supportive. The last thing I want to talk about is really training consistency. So standardizing your program, making sure that employees know what to expect. Oftentimes in larger organizations, you have several teams within your organization that might be delivering training around compliance. So maybe your IT team has training for compliance, and your legal team and your HR team. So how do you think about making sure that you've got a consistent message around compliance training, that the communication plan is very clear and employees understand, oh, this is compliance training, this is why I'm doing it, and this is the focus, it can really, again, build that trust and consistency. I also highly recommend that you add compliance training to your onboarding program. It's a great place to get people right away and to promote the importance of compliance for new folks, and that it is a true value in your organization. All right, we have another poll, Liz. Okay, so let's take a minute here. What best practice are you currently focusing on within your organization? Okay, implementing consistent compliance training across the organization, gamification, rewards, and recognition, frequent trainings throughout the year, integrating LMS with existing tech stacks, CRMs, HR management systems, etc., leveraging dynamic reporting and dashboards, or something else. Please, we'd love to hear from you. Put it in the chat.
Oh, people are answering this one a little more quickly.
Okay.
Seeing some numbers. I can maximize it here so we can take a look.
Yeah. Oh, wow, 51%. So this one, implementing consistent compliance training across the organization. Yes. Okay. Gamification, frequent. Yep.
And I think there's something in the chat that's interesting. Suve says, we're trying to get leaders to take responsibility for driving their team's completion rates.
Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit about that coming up when we talk about really empowering managers. It's really important because those of us maybe sitting outside of the business in HR or in the IT team or legal team focused on compliance training, we only have so much influence over whether or not somebody completes the training or not. That influence really lives within that manager employee system and within that business unit. And so some ways I've thought about that is around competition. So having leaderboards, so managers know how their teams are doing around the completion of the training. So you can get them really involved, and sometimes there's some competition with each other. When they say, oh, my team only has 3 completions and this team over here has 25 completions, like what kind of messaging, what kind of communication do I need to shift in order to see different outcomes for my team? So that's really helpful. I'll go back to, I may sound like a broken record. I think goals are really important. So if managers know that this is aligned with their goals for success within the organization and they have an accountability, they'll likely be more energized to make this happen for themselves and for their team if it's somehow connected to their goals or to the organizational goals. There's also enabling managers with their own data. So in some cases, I've seen managers have access to reporting capabilities within their learning management system. So it becomes less the responsibility of the administrator and more the responsibility of the manager to know how their team is performing. And so they're not, having to ask 3 people for data to know how it's going, or they're not waiting for that email notification that they're copied on saying your person has not done the training, but they're proactively looking at the data because they have access and they know how to use the data to better support their team and to better achieve those goals. I hope that answers the question there, and that's going to come up a little bit again shortly. All right, so next up. This one here is a big one for Litmos. We really want to be deadline driven and set dates. So this is really important to have an idea of what your expectations are. So setting firm dates of when completion needs to happen. And then also maybe thinking about it on a rolling time-based schedule. So maybe it's something that you do once a year annually across your whole organization. And then you have several components of your program that you add on a rolling basis. Maybe it's rolling based on hire date, or it could be something that's done based on a completion date or a date assigned. The key here is really to have a systematic approach to this, and also to let your tools help you so that this doesn't become a manual continual calendar reminder to do things. This should really be something that your system, your LMS can help you do. The next thing here is to create a culture of compliance. And this is really that continuous learning for reinforcement. It helps make the learning sticky. Again, when we roll out courses once a year, it's impossible for folks to remember everything. And so how do we think about compliance as not, a one and done or, a series of courses and done, but how do we think about this as, like any other learning that we really want to make sticky? It's a continuous program that we space throughout the year, that we talk about consistently in our programming, and we really keep it top of mind for folks. Some ways you can do that is, sending out future assessments. So maybe you've taken a training and you want to reinforce some concepts. You can send out future time-based assessments for folks to kind of check in on their knowledge and add more additional content if their concepts have been, maybe lost in the time. The last thing here is really to maximize your LMS with the integrations. So make this learning available in the flow of work. And part of that is the integration with some of your other tools and systems. So are you using your CRMs? Are you using your HRIS systems? Making sure that your learning data is connected to your system so that it's not a separate thing that happens off the side, and it's really integrated into that flow of what employees are already doing and where they already are working. This slide really speaks to what I talked about earlier, which is really leveraging that reporting and helping empower your managers. They really are your best advocate for making sure that compliance training is not check the box. It is part of the conversation, and importantly, it actually gets done within the time frame that you have set expectations for it to get done. So when we look at reporting more consistently, and it's not simply that once a year that we check back and see did it happen. It helps our managers become more engaged in the process. It helps us become more aware of what's really happening organizationally. It helps our employees understand the importance and the value when it's not just the once a year. I also am a big advocate for this empowerment of manager usage. So if managers have access to their data, they really can be more accountable. And however that works within your organization, whether you're providing the reports to them or giving them access to pull their own data, really setting them up for success and maybe even training them on their role within this program and how to leverage their data, maybe even how to have conversations around compliance so that we can move away from, hey, you've got to do this compliance training with, why do we do compliance training? What's the real value for the organization? What do we all gain when our organization is both internally viewed and externally viewed as an ethical company? And I think those are the conversations that can really shift the mindset around compliance. Ooh, the time has come. Emilee, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes. Well, we are all very eager to hear your story and learn more about really the how. How do we make this all happen? And you've really done that with Celigo. Before we go into the details, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about Celigo and your team.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Pam. So hi, everyone. My name is Emilee Johnson. I have been with Celigo for over 5 years now. And in the 5 years when I had started, we were like a 150-person company, and now we're over 800. And when I started the enablement team and looking at just ensuring that we have compliance in place. So I'll dig a little bit deeper into that in just a second. When I think about compliance, there are actually two core elements or components of it. So I bifurcate it into thinking about compliance from the security side of the house and the HR side of the house. So just myself and another peer of mine, so a party of two, we're now a team of 10, and we run global enablement, and I would say that we attribute our success to being able to partner with Litmos and ensuring that we utilize all the different resources they have available from the settings in the courses, so that I don't have to sit there and manually alert individuals when they have to take their compliance courses. I don't have to give them that bite-sized learning, where you talk about, to ensure that they remember what they're learning. And then it just makes my security officer really happy, because in the space that we're in, so Celigo is an iPaaS, it's an integration platform as a service. So we integrate different softwares together, databases and whatnot together. Security is a really, really big deal. And by leveraging Litmos and some of the courses that we've created on our own, and some of the courses that Litmos makes available through the Heroes course, catalog, we've been able to kind of complement each other and ensure that everybody has the compliance training that they need in the right mindset that they're looking for. So compliance training is really different for different audiences. So we really make our training library very robust, given just their different vertical segments that they're in. So super excited to be here, and I totally geek out when I talk about compliance.
That's great. I love it. Well, maybe we'll take a step back now and just talk about what organizational challenges were preventing Celigo from reaching compliance training goals.
A really great question. Thanks for that, Pam. So prior to Litmos and launching Celigo University, compliance is really hard for us. It was extremely manual and a very tedious process. Literally, we were working off a spreadsheet. So, if you're sitting there kind of thinking or kind of nodding your head, whether it's Microsoft Excel or you're working in Google Sheets, right? Stop the madness. Really just kind of leverage what we have in the reporting for Litmos, and utilize all the different settings features so that it can be automated. I like to say it's almost like a one and done. You kind of set it and kind of forget about it, and you just make regulatory updates as needed. So now, as I mentioned, we kind of separate it between security and HR for compliance needs. And then what we actually do is we supplement some of the things that we need. So we do create our own courses like GDPR. So if anybody is out there, and depending on the vertical segment that you're in, GDPR, HIPAA compliance, so on and so forth. The Litmos Heroes courses are just, they're basic. They're a really good launching point. But depending on your industry, you might need something a little bit more tailored and custom to your needs. And what's really great about Litmos is it gives us that flexibility that we can actually use your content authoring tool, or we can use a separate tool if we choose to do so. But it gives you that flexibility of creating very engaging courses and learning tracks, so that users can be, so the learning experience is not mundane, I guess you can say. So it kind of keeps everything live and vibrant within the system.
Yeah, really helping with engagement. So I heard you say there, some of your big challenges before moving to the Litmos platform were really manual. You were doing a lot of manual tracking, and you didn't have content. It sounds like you were maybe limited on what kind of compliance training content you could provide the organization.
Yes, that's correct. So with Litmos, it's given us really the ability to set the compliance dates on courses. So once we establish that, users are in essence automatically assigned the course upon onboarding, and some of the compliance courses are set up to auto expire on the anniversary date. So Litmos allows us to automatically alert the users and allow them to take the courses. With the courses, you can upload a certificate, and you can embed just the expiration date on there. And that's what they use in order to ensure that they're meeting all the compliance regulatory elements, so that when we do go into an audit, instead of kind of tracking down all the different spreadsheets, Pam, my compliance officer just asks for one report. We send it to the auditing firm, and that's it. It just takes care of itself in a matter of minutes.
Wow. Sounds like it's much easier on you and your team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it doesn't take a large team at all. It actually just takes one person, a matter of minutes, on setting those settings within the courses, and then just kind of keeping an eye on it, just to make sure that if your compliance requirements do change, because some of the courses are good for 1 year and other courses are good for 2 years, depending on your security needs. Setting those alerts just saves us a tremendous amount of time.
Super. Yeah, I've heard a lot of things that you kind of touched on, best practices that you've used within your organization, some reporting capabilities, content, for example, and also using the CAT tool, which is an authoring tool that you can use within Litmos to create your own content. What other features do you find yourself using? A lot of folks were kind of curious about the leaderboards and some engagement strategies. What are you doing in those spaces to kind of help managers kind of own some of this process as well as engaging your workforce?
Yep, that's a really great question with that. Again, we use everything that Litmos has available. Like, why not? And we kind of use a plethora of everything that is available at our disposal. So you talked earlier, Pam, about reporting. So ad hoc reporting. So the quick reports are the ones that already are available in the system. We leverage that all the time. Managers, administrator, learner dashboards, we leverage that. You had talked about just connecting to different systems, and we are heavy users of the API. So as an integration company, we're experts in that. But what we use is an out-of-the-box integration that you have with Salesforce. So that helps users meet them where they're at, because that's one of the key messages that you had mentioned. So for our university, it's not just employee training. It is partner training. It is customer training. It is prospect training. And we have training globally dispersed around the world. So having those APIs and being able to feed into our CRM or our HRIS solution has been really powerful, so that as new employees come to us and they're onboarded, they're automatically triggered and sent updates and alerts to all of the different trainings that they need to take. And what happens on the back end too is you can establish alerts to notify their manager if someone hasn't completed it. And we also notify the administrator. So HR is right on top of those HR courses. Our security officers on top of the compliance security courses to ensure that everybody is meeting those guidelines in those very strict timeframes. So the email and SMS notifications have been really key. And, one of the things, Pam, you talked about was just, the bite-sized learning. Yes, compliance training when it comes to security, it's not fun. Maybe some of the content is a little bit dry, right? So you can use the content authoring tool to mix it up a little bit, right? You can have a mix and match. You can have fill in the blanks. You can have open text. You can have multiple choice, all of that. But then also there's this wonderful boost feature. If anybody online is familiar with it, you can send out a boost and randomly someone will get an alert. And you just want to make sure, like, did they understand the content that they were reviewing to ensure that they remember it? So for our, let's say, our professional services team, there are very, very strict guidelines in regards to what you can do with customer credentials as we're going into their environment and making sure that we are helping them execute or build out some integration flows or helping them troubleshoot. So we just want to make sure that they understand what they're responsible for. And so all of these features combined help with it. So I talked about the compliance date feature. Of course, we leverage the content library extensively and Litmos implementation support. So if I get lost, and I'm a very technical person, but I do get lost, it's been so great to work with the support team and my customer success manager to answer any questions that, they help answer any questions that we might have. And they're a very, very creative team. If you find that you're needing something, they have a wonderful thing called the AHA ideas, where you can submit an idea and people can vote for each other's ideas. One of these days, I'm hoping something's called the Emilee feature, because I have a lot of ideas and people vote on it. But what I really appreciate is just the openness that the product team has, the company has, to understanding how we're using the platform. And in the 3.5 years that I've partnered with Litmos, it's helped us out tremendously.
Super. One other question I just came up from the audience that might be helpful. So you're a global organization, and you're rolling out compliance training across different markets that Celigo operates in. So can you talk a bit about how you've thought about translations, local and local regulatory requirements, global requirements? How have you kind of processed all of that to create Celigo University?
Gosh, really great question, Pam. So one of the features, if you haven't leveraged it yet, when you're sending out those automated messaging or those emails that let somebody know that they're enrolled in a course, right? Whether it's an HR course, a security course, and whatnot, they can set they as in the user, the learner can set their own time zone, but their own language as well. So those alerts do come out to them in those different languages. Now for us, because we are a global company, but we operate primarily, a lot of our business is in the US. We do create our content US based, but again, just kind of like leveraging the Litmos Heroes courses. If you're leveraging some of those courses, if you look at their course catalog, a lot of them are available in multiple languages. And our distributed audience does leverage that. I was able to apply Google Analytics to my university. And from there, besides Antarctica, so one day I would dominate Antarctica. Litmos is accessible and it's being accessed in over 200 countries in 6 different continents in all different languages. So we leverage what you have extensively, Pam, and that's really helped us be have that global reach per se to ensure that we're helping with the global enablement.
Yeah, super. Thank you for sharing that. I have lots of maybe something about engagement. How do you find like the boosts and maybe the content in particular? How is that helpful to your engagement strategy? It looked like a really large challenge for most folks on our audience. Like, how do we keep learners engaged with online content and in particular compliance-focused content?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime we create content within the university, we look at the adult learning theory, right? I think there's some chats that are coming through that are asking about like what theories or methodologies do we look at when we're creating course content to make sure it's applicable. So the ADDIE principle is really huge for us. But the adult learning theory, similar to what you said, Pam, is meet the learners where they are. So it's not 100% go into the university, it's available on demand 24/7, and you just go through the motions. We recognize that for our own employees, for example, there are different cultural learning aspects, and then learners learn in different formats. So what we like to do is complement our on-demand learning, with different in-person learning as well. And we really partner closely with our human resources team to say, like, how can we just take the fundamental core training and take it to the next level and extend it? So, for example, while you do have HR courses that are mandatory, like sexual harassment for managers, employees that you have to take for some compliance requirements, we take it to a whole nother step and say that, once you're onboarded, we're really invested in your career growth and developing you as an employee and kind of up-level and upskilling you. So we look at core competencies, courses, and then we just kind of map that out into our HR strategy as a whole. So we try to keep the learners engaged by giving them, different vignettes of types of training. So some of them are online courses, some are town halls, and some are like, hey, we have an open forum. Here's a webinar. We're going to take people through some learning ideas, and then we move forward with that. And we do a lot of surveys just to kind of see what our employees asking for. And then we try to develop content in collaboration with different department leaders to make it more meaningful and more relevant for them.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, what a great example of really moving away from check the box to a whole organizational strategy around building an ethical and compliant culture, and really kind of thinking about the learning as more of a blended learning solution, like we do with many other training programs. You're really thinking about this more holistically. It's not just, hey, here are these courses, go do this online, but how do we integrate it into our culture? How do we integrate it into other types of training programs that we are already, we're already promoting? So really, thank you for sharing that. Super helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's about time that we move to our Q&A. If we've got some folks with questions online, we'd love to be able to answer some of those questions.
I'm happy to give you guys some questions that we're seeing in the Q&A.
Sure.
I saw one that had to do with what are some examples of mandatory compliance training?
So mandatory compliance training. So I guess in my perspective, so first and foremost, quick caveat, right? Definitely not providing any legal advice or guidance there. I'm just kind of speaking from my own experience of when we started, we just have like one HR director we're working with, no compliance officer, and trying to learn like what would fit our companies and organizations' needs as we grew globally into multiple countries and multiple offices. So like I mentioned before, if you are subscribed to the Litmos Heroes courses, like off the shelf, they have some wonderful courses that are very, that's a good launching point. And if you are subscribed to it, like we have for the last 3.5 years, there are constant updates to it. So we leverage that as a baseline. And then what we do is, now that our organization has grown, I work with different leaders in different regions to see if there's something specific to their region that we need to create an add-on learning for, like that supplements or complements the training, and then we'll create that particular element. I don't know, Liz, if that kind of answered your question or not.
No, that's great. I think that's a really good jumping off point for folks. I think I'm just looking through here. I want to make sure that I address a variety of questions here.
And I do want to chime in and mention that, one of the things that Pam had mentioned on here was just a great article about just, compliance training itself. Mm-hmm. Recently, there was a great blog by one of your instructional designers. I believe it was Jonathan Davis. And he kind of talked about just compliance training, pre-built versus custom courses. And when I read through that, I'm like, it just really hit home to me, because it's things that constantly percolate through my head when I'm trying to consider, do I use something that is already, kind of available off the shelf, right? So some of the things Jonathan talks about was the cost effectiveness of it, the time saving, the broad coverage, the expertise of it, benchmarking, so on and so forth. But on the other side of this spectrum, if you're creating a custom build course, for me, that's almost like a course like a 2.0, an evolution of it. So when you're creating something that's a little bit more custom, there's more relevance to it, because you're addressing specific organizational needs and compliance requirements, addressing different risks and challenges. And then Jonathan also talks about aligning to the company culture, engagement, flexibility, so on and so forth. So for anyone online, if you're kind of sitting there thinking, I only have it's just me, I can guarantee that you can absolutely be successful utilizing Litmos and the Heroes courses and kind of using that as your benchmark. But if you're a larger organization with a global reach and you're kind of like, gosh, there are so many nuances that I have to get on top of, right? You definitely want to work with your HR team, or if you have a compliance officer, kind of really diving in and kind of understanding, how do we make something that's really relevant for us? And you might lean towards creating a custom course, and then you might end up in the same boat that we are in. Is we leverage both in order to make sure that we are very thorough, the training is consistent, it's available on demand, and it meets the learners where they want to be met.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. And just to let people know, I did put a link to that blog post in the chat. And it is, it's a great resource for understanding the benefits and challenges of each method. One other question from Matt is, in an industry where staffing may be an issue and there's a call for live training, how would you schedule or organize trainings to maximize completion? So this is about instructor-led trainings.
Yeah, really great question. And for Matt, I believe, who asked that question, I don't know if you've leveraged it. Again, going back to the great tooling inside of Litmos, you can integrate like a Zoom account into it, and you can schedule meetings from there. What we like to do is, for our global employee base, we like to have the training available in 3 different time zones, right? So one that's for EMEA, the one's for US, and one that's for the APAC region. That has been kind of like our go-to kind of default for the 3 core buckets that kind of hits all the global regions. And we do have the same training available, and we also make it available online as well. So one of the nifty things that we do is every time we have a live webinar, we curate that and convert that into a course, and we pop it into Litmos. We pop it into our university, because guess what? That's a digital footprint. And that's something that I always talk to my team about. When somebody accesses the course and they complete it, you don't have to chase them down. You don't have to chase their manager down. You just go in, pull report, and see who's accomplished it, and you can report it out. So one of the things that our company looks at is OKR, so objectives and key results. And as one of those things, I always have as part of that, just the learning, right? So we have different certifications. I love it. Gamification that we have in the system. We've built all that out with Litmos, and we actually report it at an executive level to say who's completed training at what level, the percentage, and I have markers. So it's really a partnership with the compliance officer on the security courses, with my HR team for onboarding and HR relevant courses. We want to make sure that there's a global reach and everybody's participating. But in order for them to participate, one of the things Pam talked about is just ensuring that, there's consistency, right? We don't want lack of employee or manager engagement. We want to be able to get the reports for deeper analysis. It allows you to do all of that in conjunction when you do run the report. And we set that expectation out of the gates as part of the onboarding, that there are different learnings that they have to take as a requirement, and different learnings we encourage them to take as part of their own employee development. And by positioning it that way, we've really been able to get a really high engagement rate and completion rate of all the different courses that we put out there.
That's awesome. I think to do with completion rates and engagement, we did have a question. I'm trying to find it now from, where was it? We have quite a few questions popping up, so that's good. Thanks for everyone who has been adding questions to the Q&A. Oh, it's from Dev. Here we go. How do you combat a lack of engagement with the reporting when reporting frequently?
No, go ahead, Pam.
I'll make a quick note, and then you can, tell us how you do it. I think Emilee kind of hit on this. It's really that sponsorship. So at our executive level, Emilee is able to provide that reporting, and they're looking and they care and they're invested in it. And when you have sponsorship across that level of leadership within the organization, the reporting matters. And folks don't just, kind of brush it off as like that thing that is, from HR or from compliance. It's really part of the organizational goals and the expectations at that leadership level. So my recommendation there is, if you're really struggling, get some engagement at your executive level and find some sponsors who are invested in this with you, and have them help you with the voice for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And I do want to add to that is the fact that whether I was a team of 2 or a team of 10 for the enablement side of the house, it really is all of my frontline managers that are in partnership with us. So again, just not to pound on all the different amazing Litmos features, but if you establish somebody as a manager in the system and they have a hierarchy, right? So you establish the teams and they have the hierarchy there. When they log in, they can see all of their team members, all of the courses they completed, and other courses they haven't. So we actually partner with the leaders to put the responsibility kind of, I don't want to say back on them, but in partnership with them, so that gives them those conversation pieces, right? As leaders, they're responsible for their team's, growth and development. That's just a part of the tooling and the tech stack that's provided to them. And it's part of the data set that they can leverage in order to drive those proper conversation. So yes, at the executive level, we kind of drive it down to the different frontline managers, but giving them immediate access and empowering them to have that information, to have the right conversations with their team. That's what we do within Litmos.
That's awesome. And obviously leadership buy-in is really important. And it's one of the things that folks had flagged as a challenge in our initial poll. So I think those are great tips to get that buy-in. I wanted to quickly call on Christy Bacchus to give us some insights, because we did have a couple of questions about our course offerings in terms of whether we have specific course offerings for different regions and different states in the United States. And we also had some questions about our leaderboards, and people kind of just wanted more details on the gamification aspects of our Litmos product. So I wanted to marshal Christy into the chat here and see if she could give us some insights on both of those features.
Excellent. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, excellent. So I've been trying to answer some of the questions and concerns that we had in the chat, but let me talk specifically about gamification. So we do have that feature built within Litmos. So you, based on course completions, learning path completions, also discussion forum participation, maybe even filling out a checklist with your supervisor. All those kind of training activities can be tied to completing those gamification components. So that means, earning badges, earning points, and also attaining different levels as defined by you. So this can actually be tied in with compliance. So if you have sexual harassment prevention, and by the way, we do have one specifically for the state. So if you're looking at California, they have different requirements than Illinois does for sexual harassment prevention. Those are their state laws. So we do have courses specific for that. So if you don't want to tie those into when they complete those courses, learning paths, activities, you can certainly do that. That's another incentive for them to go into the system and be rewarded. So we're very conscious of the different laws that are appropriate for specific states, and also for specific provinces in Canada. And then lastly, globally, as far as country specific requirements too, whatever those may be. Now, you may have something in the UK that you're required to do that you wouldn't have in the US. And again, we have learning paths that are specifically for that. So although we are not legal advisors, right, we don't advise you legally, we do have legal SMEs that we consult with when we're developing our courses to make sure we do follow those requirements there. Okay.
And then in terms of gamification, a few folks were just asking a little bit more about the leaderboards. Like specifically, I think there was a question about whether you could retroactively apply badges to folks who had completed a compliance course, or what those leaderboards sort of look like. So if you could provide any insights on the leaderboards and how those work, that would be great.
Yeah, you bet. Currently, the way that the gamification feature works is that if you do create a new program, a new level, or a new badge or new points, it doesn't go back retroactively and do that. It works from that point that you created to whatever one completes that minute after, or less than that seconds after you actually create that program. So we don't have that retroactive feature built in yet. But again, lucky you, we've just hired some more product management team members. So we're going to be accelerating our enhancement deployments much quicker than we have in the past. So I think you're going to be really excited about that.
Awesome. Thanks so much for hopping in and answering some of those questions. Let's see. I'm going to go back to our queue here. Oh, okay. Barbara is asking, how can we integrate compliance training into our broader professional development initiatives to ensure that employees meet regulatory requirements, but also have ongoing skill enhancement and career growth? So that's a heavy question.
It's a big one for the next 3 minutes, but Emilee, it sounds like you've really been able to accomplish this with kind of that blended learning approach that you've talked about and integration into your professional development learning programs. Maybe you can speak to that.
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't on mute, and I was trying to find that question back in the Q&A.
Oh, I just marked it as answered, so it would be in that answered section. Okay. Yeah, and it's Barbara.
Barbara, where are you?
I'll start as you're reading, Emilee. But I think Barbara, like in my thoughts here, it's both. It's not we just do kind of those regulatory compliance trainings and then we do professional development. We can think about integration of some of those concepts. So after you go through a regulatory type training, maybe it is on sexual harassment, how do you actually translate that into conversation and discussion, and maybe something that's actually part of your team conversation, so that it doesn't become, oh, I did that e-learning and I checked my box of completion and now I'll do it next year when my compliance comes up. But how do we think about this as something, we want to be a safe and ethical company, and this is a value we hold within our organization to keep people safe. And so this is something we can integrate into different trainings that we're already having and different conversations we're already having within the organization.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Pam. And I finally found it again, so I'm trying to circle that through my head. I would definitely echo that sentiment, right? So our strategy has always been, you start with baseline training, and we do a lot of company surveys here. So we want to know what is top of mind for employees, what is working, what isn't working. And from there, we identify what those different gaps are. And then we work with the different leaders to fill in those gaps. So as organizations grow, you morph and change and you evolve, and you just have to kind of figure it out, kind of work through it and kind of see what's resonating with the employees. So we just have a blended learning approach. So some things are available on demand, some things are available as town halls and ask me anything questions, like an open forum sessions, and others are very they're required mandatory training that we track compliance for. So it's really a blend of all of that, just to kind of ensure that when we do that set of surveys, are they leveraging everything that they're learning? And is that being exposed 6 months later when we're doing that corporate survey again? So we do a lot of data analysis to ensure that we are putting forth the right content at the right time to the right audience.
Yeah, really listening to your workforce. It's great, Emilee. Well, I think we are at time, just at the top of the hour. Thank you, Emilee, for being with us today. It was really wonderful to hear your experience. And Christy, thanks for all your support on the product. And Liz, thanks for shepherding us through this webinar today. It was really nice to be with you all.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.